I will just do a brief intro and order of play. Sarah is going to do a first little bit on short form documentary workflows. Just a little brief description. Sarah, myself and Simon, we all work on different length formats, but predominantly short form, and this is catered specifically for short form projects. And yeah, so that'll be documentary, and then I will be doing a bit on commercials and just a few kind of tips, tricks, personal things I do when I'm putting something together. And I'll also talk about working with client, agency, director in the suite, and just some little bits of, you know, housekeeping and things that you would normally do, just helpful hopefully if you're ever going into that situation. And then Simon is going to talk through how he puts together his music videos and his workflow, and then we're going to do a Q&A at the end, 10 minutes. So I will hand over to Sarah and she will tell you who she is and speak to you later.
Cool. Hi everyone. So I'm Sarah. I've been editing for coming up to probably about 10 years now. I work on sort of a variety of different types of projects, from long form to short form, all sorts of stuff, but my main focus tends to be documentary. So I'm going to talk about documentary. So I guess in terms of editing, docs are obviously very different because you're sort of finding the film in the edit. You know, you don't have like a script or a storyboard, so it's kind of different from other types of short form in that sense, and that obviously changes the workflow as well. So the first thing I want to talk about is just purely organisation, and that often starts before you even, you know, make a project. So the first thing I would talk about is camera cards. So when you get your media, obviously you want to start your organisation from the absolute base level on your Finder, or whatever it's called in Windows. So I would always have a separate sound folder and a separate camera folder. Keep all your rushes, you know, really well organised, separate, and ideally you want to keep that on a separate hard drive. You want to be running your project on your computer hard drive and keeping all your media separate. It's faster. It's just a much more, in terms of the computer, it's happier if you can run it that way. Also, I would keep your media organised like by day in your Finder, or by, you know, contributor, however you want to organise it, depending on the project. Keep it super organised. If you're working with docs, this isn't necessarily every project, but even in like high-end projects, it's quite likely that you'll get stuff that's been shot on like a DSLR or GoPro, because obviously with docs you can get into places that you maybe can't get into with a big camera with a DSLR. But the problem with DSLRs is you'll get your camera cards and, you know, all your clips are named maybe like C001, C002, and if you've got, say, 5 cards with the same names of clips, when you bring that into Premiere, if you try it online at the end, or even just open your project again, Premiere's going to freak out and not know if this clip C1 is the same as this clip C1. So it's really important to rename all your files at the beginning. So you can do that with Automator on a Mac, and there's lots of ways in Windows you can do that as well. So that's really important. And obviously if you are working on a project that's been shot on multiple different cameras, a lot of your media will be coming to you with different frame rates. So it's really important to speak to either the director or producer or whoever's looking after you to find out what the project needs to be cut in. So what frame rate the project needs to be cut in. Because the worst thing you could do is to be, you know, cutting in 30 frames a second if you're in the US, and needing to be delivering at 24. So it's really important to do that right at the beginning. Never do that midway in. It's a nightmare. Another thing before you start is, if you can, get transcripts of all your interviews. It's a big thing in documentary, obviously. If you've got like an hour-long interview, the last thing you want to be doing is watching that in Premiere and having to make notes and work off it. You need transcripts. So ideally, before you start, find out if transcripts are available. If they haven't been made, get them made. It will save you years. That's really important. So when you come to your project, I'm going to show you a project that I am working on at the moment. I'm trying to share my screen. Here we go. So hopefully you can see this in Premiere now. You see my Premiere window. Kat, can you see it? Is it all good? Give me a nod. Cool. So this is a project about surrogacy in Britain. I'm just going to talk you through how I sort of set this up. So the first thing I did when I was making this was to make proxies. So this was shot anamorphic, quite high res. And, you know, my computer can handle it, and most computers, you know, nowadays can kind of handle this sort of footage. But as soon as you start adding grade, as soon as you start adding effects, it's going to really slow you down. So proxies are just super, super important. And also, if you can, try and get a day of prep added to your edit time so that you have time to make proxies. It's obviously a very long-winded process of how best to do that. So I would Google it for more information, but there's lots of ways you can do it. You can use Resolve, you can use Media Encoder. There's obviously a proxy workflow built into Premiere now. That's the way I tend to do it, just because it's a bit smoother. Always watch your audio channels. It's really important because Premiere is very picky about matching your proxy audio channels to your raw media. So that's super important. And I would say always do a batch test. So test make like 5 proxies of different types, set that running, and then check them. So the last thing you want to do is set up all your proxies running and then find out that none of them connect to the end. That's really important. So then you want to start making folders or bins in your Premiere project window. So for this project, I kind of do this all the time really. I always have like a number system. So the first one is edits. So I always keep my current project or my current edit in one bin on its own. So I know, like, whenever I'm starting, I know that that's my one that keeps me organized. Then in archive, this is a very simplified project, you see. I have cut version 1, cut version 2. So for example, like the director that I'm working with at the moment, we're making some changes to this version 3 at the moment, but there's certain things in version 2 that she was really keen to go back to. So it's really, really, really important to keep your previous versions, because your director will often be referring back to those. The last thing you want to do is have lost it in your, and have to go back into the autosave folder and try and find a project that might happen to have that version in it. So that's really important. So then if we go to media, so this project was basically shot over 2 time periods, so August and December. So I've categorized all my media by time, basically. And then within that, so I have 2 contributors in this film. So you have 2 women who are featured. And I've organized everything by sort of day 1 and 2 for each of them. Hi, Simon, got you on video now. So I have like day 1 and day 2 for each contributor. You'll see in the December one, there was less footage, so it's kind of smaller. So yeah, just keep that super, super organized. Another thing that's really important to start off with is, if you look in this camera folder here, if I open this clip, if you go to your frame rate column, I'm going to call it column, sometimes you'll get obviously camera cards with a mix of different frame rates. Say for example, some of the footage in here was say shot at like 60 frames a second. Some cameras like this, for example, I think this was Alexa, your slow-mo footage will come in to your Premiere or will be shot at 24 frames. Other cameras, again, going back to like DSLR type footage, when you bring it in, anything slow-mo will be at like 60 frames or 50 frames or 100 frames or whatever. So if it's been shot at a really high frame rate, the best thing to do to get it working in your project is to go into Premiere. So say, for example, you're going to pretend with me for this, that this clip was, say, shot at 60 frames. This is another thing that is worth Googling, because it's quite complicated, but it's really important that you do it at this level of the project. Hit interpret for footage, and then you want to hit assume this frame rate. And because our project is at 24, hit OK. And then this here would then change to 24. Doesn't help that I didn't give you a 60 frame clip, but you get that. So it's really important to do that at this level instead of bringing it into your sequence, because if you bring it into your sequence, then you have to try and slow it down and figure it out, and Premiere wants to do it this way, so it's easier to do that. So that's another thing that's really important. Then I guess the next thing I did was probably start syncing audio. So with this project, let me find it. Here we go. So with this project, there wasn't actually any camera audio recorded, which isn't the ideal way you want to work, but it's fixable as long as there's clapperboards like this. So this was really well clapped and really well organised on set, so it was kind of fine that they didn't have camera audio. But this is the next thing that I would do, is to start syncing everything, because you need this before you can, you know, start cutting anything. So yeah, sync your audio. There's a way in Premiere that you can use this. It's called auto sync. It's fine. It's not the most reliable thing in the world, but it works some of the time, so it's worth trying. It's basically just a way of syncing the camera audio with the externally recorded sound. It usually uses the waveform. There's different ways of doing that, but that's one thing to try. And then in terms of these sequences, these are what I would call string outs, which I think is kind of a TV phrase. It's also kind of really necessary in docs, because you really just need to be able to see all your media in a really visual way. So, for example, so if we look at this, the first string that I made was Jessica, who's one of the contributors, August, day one. So this sequence here has all the media that was shot on this one day, all laid out. So if I need to go back to it and, you know, I need to see if there was a shot that was similar to, say I'm looking at this shot of the house and I want to see if there's another angle, then it's just a really quick way of, you know, or another angle or another house. It's a really quick way of doing it. I also use, and I'm making string outs, chapter markers like this. I've just double clicked on that marker. So here, when I open this sequence, I can see immediately, like, there's exteriors, there's an interview bit, there's a bit with the contributor and her children, there's a bit where she goes to a nail salon, and the way you make these, I'll just make one to show you, because I do this a lot and people don't seem to know this function's there. So if I want to hit marker like that and create a new marker at that point, if I like test, and then you just want to drag out this duration here, and then immediately you've got a marker. And it's if you like words, I don't know, I'm quite visual, but I also like words to organize with. It's just another way of keeping yourself organized, basically, and be able to know exactly what's in a sequence when you get to it. Another thing is color labels. So if I take you back to the current edit of this is very work in progress, so it's a bit of an empty sequence. But if I show you the whole sequence as it stands now in this assembly, we have 2 contributors. So I originally labeled the sound for each contributor with a different color. So when it comes to the edit, I know how balanced it is across the edit. So I know whether this lady is being, like, underrepresented in the cut, because I know the director wants a really balanced edit. And then I have, say, this one, which is green. This is like a little moment of actuality. So I know that that's separate again. That's one thing you can do. You can also color things by day. Any other kind of system, depending on what kind of project you're doing, basically. And then when it comes to actually cutting docs, there's a few things. I mean, again, this all depends on how you use Premiere, whether you're like an in-out insert kind of editor, or whether you like drag and drop. Like, there's no right or wrong, obviously. One thing I do quite a lot is use pancake timelines. People have all sorts of different names for them, but one that seems to be cutting through is pancake timelines, because they look like flat pancakes, obviously stacked. And this is one thing in Premiere that's quite nice if you are quite like a visual editor. Say if I'm going to say this is my sequence here that I'm cutting in, and I want to find, say, another flower shot. Like, some people will scroll through footage in the bins, some people will use string outs, so obviously there's lots of ways of doing this, but say I like this and I want to use, you know, this section. I can immediately just flip between. Okay, that's not worked, but you know what I mean. It's a really quick way, basically, of cutting in and out. So yeah, I would recommend using pancake timelines. Again, if you can have, like, the most monitor space you can get, makes it easier to have the most, you know, real estate for your timelines. Helps a lot. Another thing I do when it comes to cutting docs is, so I'm going to show you a document that I made so this was for a different film. This is a bit of a longer film, but you can apply the same technique to short films or short docs, because, again, it's just organization. So this film was shot over, I think, 17 days. And I wanted a way to be able to see all of the footage, or maybe it's more about highlighting like really, really key clips or moments or interviews, and be able to keep track of that when you first watch through. So anything that sticks out to you, you can make a sort of a record of. So for this sheet particularly, I had a column with all the days, clip numbers, and then here I have a column that basically represents like scenes or, you know, really great clips that are B-roll, that kind of thing. Then I have another column that's interviews. And as I was watching through, the first time I watched any of this footage, so I was trying to preserve my sort of first reaction to it, I suppose. I took a screenshot of anything that was, you know, a really standout shot that I didn't want to be missed, you know, and forgotten about in days and days of B-roll footage. So you can see, for example, on day one, these two shots really stuck out to me, so I've screenshot them and put them in. As we go through, there's just lots of great shots in here that, you know, I didn't want to lose. And the way I use this when I'm cutting is, say for example, I've got a little moment that I need some perfect B-roll, and I'm like, there's, you know I've seen a shot of a flag, for example, like an American flag. All I have to do is flip to Safari, or whatever browser you use, hit find, type flag, and immediately I've got which day that was shot, the clip number, and I've got a record of it. And it's just a really, in fact, there's another, there you go, another flag. So this does take time to make, obviously. It probably took me half a day, but I did it while I was watching the footage. So it's not impossible, and it's absolutely invaluable. And it seems like a lot of work, but I promise it's not. I flip back to this probably every few hours when I'm cutting, or when I was cutting this film. It's a really, really smart, I'm not taking credit for it, it wasn't my idea. But it's a really smart way of doing things. And in the same document as well, I kept all my transcripts for interviews. So all my interviews are in here. It just keeps everything really organized. So whenever I need something, I can just get my hands on it immediately. So I'd really recommend that as well. In terms of interviews, if we go back to interviews, I'll show you, say this example interview here, for example. One thing, if you're cutting a doc that has a lot of interviews in it, I would really recommend learning your shortcuts. I mean, this is a very obvious one, I'm sure everyone knows this, but JKL on your keyboard is play, pause, and reverse. But if you hit L, I'm hitting L once. If I hit L a few times, suddenly we're really sped up. And it takes a while to get used to this, but if you can learn to listen back to interviews at double speed, which it sounds weird at first, but it's doable, you will speed through your interviews, particularly if you don't have transcripts, so much quicker. So yeah, that's another tip I would really recommend. It sounds, obviously the sound is a bit weird, but it's worth doing. Another thing with transcripts and short docs is, if you can, do a paper edit before anything. If you, sorry, I'm trying to think of that. If you, the problem with going too far, I guess, on your own as an editor, with particularly the short film, when you might not have much time and you're kind of left to it and you just need to figure everything out. If you cut your doc in a way that is, maybe completely not what the director was expecting, you're going to have to go back so far. Whereas if you can get a paper edit, which is just, lines from transcripts, copied, pasted, put into an order of, how you see the structure of the film, how you see it developing, it's a really helpful way of kind of making sure that your director, or you and your director are on the same page, basically. So I'd really recommend always doing a paper edit before you even touch the cut or get too far into the cut. Yeah, I guess that's it really. We were going to talk about how you prep things for grade, but I guess that's kind of a thing that is the same between docs, commercials, music videos. So yeah, I'm going to wrap up on docs then. I think we need to unmute Kat. Okay. There you go.
If anyone has any specific questions, of course we'll be doing this Q&A at the end. So I think Sarah said she could carry on talking about any short form post workflow. If anyone has any specific things they want to know or ask about that, please feel free. I think just time wise, I think we're going to move on, unless you want to do some more, Sarah. What do you feel?
No, I'm good, unless anyone has any questions, but we'll get to questions at the end, I suppose, so go for it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be less technical than Sarah, because that's not particularly my my way. I have been technical, but I think now I think I'm more interested in the dynamics in an edit suite and things like that, and how you work with people. I think that's so much part of the job as an editor, and whether you hate that or love that, I think there's lots that we can kind of do to make life easier for ourselves. But a quick thing about me, I am Kat James. I co-created Edit Collective with my friend and partner Agathe Barbier. I've been working in the industry over 10 years. I started off as an assistant editor in Avid in feature films, specifically stop motion feature films, which was one job for 2.5 years. So I left and went into short form and trained up as an assistant and then an editor in a short form commercials edit house. Yeah, and now I'm a freelancer and working mostly in short form. And commercial project workflow is what I'll be talking about. So let me just start. So I have a project open that I'm going to show you. It's for a Scottish mental health charity. And for starters, this job, I chose this job because we had a very organised production. This is kind of the ideal commercial kind of setup. We had storyboards, we had time to make an animatic, and we had 3 30-second scripts, all completely different. And we had quite a bit of storytelling to get through in that 30. And from what we knew when we came to the edit, we had 1 5-second end board. So roughly, if someone was asking me how long that would take to do, I would say, you know, a 2-day shoot, you could select quite, you know, a long day selecting to get that all broken down. And then if you sat with your director the following morning and went through best takes, and then in the afternoon compiled the edits because you'd already made the animatics, you could do those 3 30s in 2 days for a 2-day shoot, 1 camera 2-day shoot roughly. I mean, it depends like how well you know your director and the way they shoot, and this specifically is someone I've worked with before, and so we had quite quick, you know, turnaround, and we knew each other's workflow. So yeah, I will share the screen with you now. 1 sec, let me figure this out. Okay. Cool. So can you all see that? Okay. So this is my project. It's for SAMH. And if I go to find a view, I can show you my my kind of route. So I would generally name everything in ascending numbers, just so you've got your most important things at the top. I like to do import and export, so I know what days I've sent my cuts and what numbers they were. So if I ever need to go back, I can see. Transcodes, I've learned in Avid, and you know, I still think it's really important as editors that we all do an offline online workflow if we can, because really, you know, the rushes are getting bigger, and you know, we shouldn't really be expected to always have like the fastest, most expensive laptop, you know, if we're going to be doing these jobs. Like, you know, if someone's providing the kit for you, it's different, and they want you to edit live, they have to make sure that you've got the kit for that. But I don't think it should be expected as standard, so offline online is what I would always still recommend. And I won't go into too much about transcodes, but normally I just cut in Apple ProRes LTs. I make them, I make sure that there's a DIT on set who transcodes, make sure the audio is synced, and then you can pretty much get going straight away. I'd always make sure we've got some guide tracks before we get into the edit, or at least the producer or the director have been thinking about that, what sound they want, something that I can get in and work with straight away. And also I ask about end boards, because when you're working to a 30-second commercial, you have potentially a VO, you know, sync audio and an end title and all of that. especially the end title, it could be 5 seconds, it could be 15 seconds. You have to make sure that you know what you've got, so that you know how long your story is going to be up until that point. And so I always try and push the producer and the director to clarify with the client about your end board, because I feel like that makes a big difference. Even so, like 50% of the time, you'll make your edit, and yeah, you will end up in the client presentation with a 5-second end board, and suddenly you've got to add a hashtag and loads of terms and conditions, and you've lost another 10 seconds of your edit, and you just have to make it work. So yeah, you can always try as you want, but it doesn't mean it's always going to end up like that. So yeah, this is my project. I just have my edits split into the duration, so I only found out after I'd already started that I was doing 10 seconds as well as 3:30s. That always happens. I break down my rushes, transcodes into rolls. That's the first thing I do, and that just comes from the days of having it shot on film and rolls being the way we worked. So it'd be to the end of the camera roll, the camera take, and I would just make them in order and keep them in shoot order. So slate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's the way they were shot, so that I know that they're staying. So if I need to look at something that is day 2, end of day 2, I know I've got it here and it's easy for me to get to. So with my slate, I would just put everything from that card or that setup in one timeline, and I would just lay it all down without any selection, so that when I come to select, once I've made my rolls, I can drag them into my source monitor, which is my favorite way of working. And I would then go to my selects, I would make a new sequence, and in here I would just go through and pull out just in, out in my source monitor, and then in my recorder make sure there's no in and out, and I would just be laying it down using, you know, just your standard, cutting it in. And then as you go, if you have it set up in your project so that this window is always highlighted, your source monitor, it means that when you're selecting, it doesn't then go down to your timeline and you can see the blue line around it and highlight it, which means you have one more click to go back into your source monitor. So I always make sure that this is always the default highlighted window, so I can just keep playing and selecting, and it just keeps going in. So it's a very fast way of going through everything. So yeah, I break it down, footy, corridor. So this is just all the setups, so that we've got every take that's usable back to back. And I have it so that in my timeline, I have a shortcut that I can skip to every edit point. And because they're every usable take, it's the beginning of every take just after they've shouted action and it started. So I can just quickly play that take, I know where it is. And if I had to count, like, you know, 3 or 4 takes, then I know which one it is if the director's kind of preferred something. When it comes to finishing up my selects, I then get my director in and we sit together and we look through the selects. And if they were happy with, say, a take, or they didn't like something, I would normally do a white marker, and that marker would then be like a director's preference. So here I've got them as green, but you could change them to anything you wanted, and I normally do a white one, but I have it set up. And then if I ever need to go back and see, oh look, this is the one that the director liked, if I ever need to go back and select something, I can see it up here while I'm editing my cut down here, and I can just cut whatever take it is in while I'm still viewing the edit, and I can just, you know, gang them together and see if there's the same length, see if I've got any issues. So yeah, as you can see here, I've got some black at the front. I always make sure there's a run-in to all my edits. I normally do a default of, I think it's, what have I got here? I always do a default. So yeah, I do 1 second. And then I know that's where all my edits are starting. I also mark at the beginning so that if anything slips, I can see that it's moved. And then I marker the 30 points so that I'm always making sure that I know exactly when I'm going over I put in my titles and I time them out so that they're sitting there, so I know what I have on the front end to work with. I always make sure I've got my 12 frames silence. I don't know if that's still a thing, but yeah, 12 frame silence front and end, I think. Someone can correct me on that. And yeah, I just start piling up all the performance takes that I like, one after the other. And if I ever need to go back through and see if there was a different take, I've basically layered it up as a pancake on the timeline, which I have in some other versions. Let me show you. This agency one. I can't find any that I've done that too here. The director's cut. So here, for instance, oh, media pending, of course. Yeah, so I've just got different takes lined up on top of each other so that I know what I could potentially need if someone asks for an alternative. So that's kind of my commercials work. But oh yeah, that's another thing. Another thing I always make sure, I'm just going to stop screen sharing for now. Hello. Yes, so if I was trying to do something as quick as possible for a commercial, I would make sure that if it's a VO script, get the guide in straight away, time that out, and talk to your director, producer if it's over length and you need to cut it down in, in the edit. Always make alternative cuts and save every single one and label them really clearly, because if you need to go back to voiceover one that you made 2 days ago when the client comes in, then you know exactly where it is and you don't have to click through a million different old edits. I always name my cuts, the product, then the title of the job, and then CC for current cut 1, 2, 3, or 4, and that's my own cut number, and then versions for whenever I show the agency or the client. And I always do agency cut 1 or client cut 2, so that I know exactly what they've seen when, and I can always track it back if I need to check anything. What else have I got here? Anyone, any interjections?
No,
sorry, what are you saying?
I was going to say your 12 frames. It's now 2 frames really, and that's just for
oh, that shows how long
to be nice and not get an audio bump on the way in and way out.
Oh right, okay, well, that's great. Thanks, I. So I've just seen there's a question in the chat, but I think you have to put the questions in the Q&A for the end. But someone's asked about, I'm not sure, Nia, if you want to keep that to the end. I don't know if you want to tag that on. You can...
Yeah, I mean, I think it's best that that Simon maybe goes next if you're finished, Kat, and then we can pick everything up at the end.
Just do 5 more minutes and then I'll...
Yeah, sure, absolutely fine.
So clients and agency and producers and directors, all those people in your room when you're stressed and you've got to keep everybody calm and happy, that's really difficult, and I would definitely say it takes practice and a level of interest in Buddhism or some form of meditation. Yeah, I mean, I always say that if you have a happy, warm, welcoming edit suite with food and water and everyone's looked after, that's half the job done, because people just want to be comfortable and they just want to be looked in the eye and they just want you to, have a conversation with them and it be genuine, and you're engaged and you want to know what they think. And I think that's really important, because you can get quite stuck in your laptop and the things that you need to do, and actually it's really important to slow down, turn around, look at your clients, look at your agency, and ask a lot of questions. If there is anything that you need to ask, don't be scared to do that. Have the confidence to ask for clarification, or if they ask you to do something, I always tell them how long I think that will take, and I always add another 10 minutes onto that just in case, so there's some room to breathe. And I think when people ask for the impossible, you should say can I have a chat with with the director, or a break? Do you guys want to go grab some lunch? You can ask them to leave and come back, as long as it's obviously not rude and it's friendly. And I think that's really important, to control the room you're in. It's your suite, it's your room, whether you're in-house somewhere, it's hired, it's your home. think it's really important that you feel in control of that. And I think your director will respect you and help you with that process, and so will your producer if they're good. And that will take a lot of the stress off you. So also, if there's any problems and you want to say it privately, just WhatsApp them while you're in the room and pretend that you're working. That's a good one.
Yeah.
We've all done that. What else have I got down? Sorry, I'm doing that annoying notes thing. Yeah, I think it's more just about not saying no when you want to say no, which is really hard. If someone says, yeah, but have you tried this? And you have tried it, and you've tried a million different things, and you've got a director that doesn't want to show it. And I think sometimes you have to just show, don't tell, and that's just the easiest way. And ask questions in a way to frame what you like, what you don't like, rather than telling them. No one likes to be told. So, you know, things like, do you think this performance looks less convincing than this one? My personal preference would be this one, and then, you know, because I think you know, it's really great, blah, blah, blah. Or, you know, just sell what it is that you're trying to do as positive. And yeah, keep your producer CC'd into every email. I think they get forgotten about a lot, and make them help you. So if you need them to go get lunch or get you food or look after you because you've got a really, really tight deadline, then do. Yeah, always discuss overtime. That's just a general, everyone in short form, always discuss overtime and be confident about it, because you should get it and not be expected to work, you know, crazy 12-hour, 18-hour days. And yeah, oh yeah, if your director comes in for the first time and you've never met them before and you're looking through the rushes and they're terrible, the only thing you ever say to your director, obviously, is, it looks great. Everything's going to be fine.
That's where I've gone wrong.
Yeah, save the criticism of what's problematic to later on, when you've actually formed a bond, and then you start working through the fires that you have to fight together, rather than you fucked up and now I've got to fix it kind of thing. So yeah, that's pretty much my little bit. Sorry, it's not particularly technical, but just my bits that I do. Obviously we're taking questions at the end, and I will kindly pass you on to Simon. Hi Simon, you're working and everything?
Yeah, all up and running. Just about. It's quite tight. So am I on full screen now? Or
yeah, you should be. Yep.
Okay. Because I can just see you.
If you share your screen, Simon, at the bottom, you should be able to do that.
And there's a gallery view up in the top right hand corner.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So oh, hi. There we are. I'll just share my screen in a minute.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm just going to do a short talk on music videos, how to kind of set up the timelines, etc. I suppose I've been cutting for just over 12, 13 years, but obviously I did quite a long time as an assistant, for about 7 years. So I started in Soho, you know, wheeling around quite a lot of film cans basically, and having to label the things up. So it's definitely been a while. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen, and then I'll just start by talking through it, and look what happens when you share your screen. Media Composer has quit. That's great. Hold on just a minute.
This is an opportunity.
Look at that. As soon as I click on there. Right. Give me 20 seconds. Click up.
Please, I think everyone, how long things take. That's
yeah. Okay, yeah. So actually, you know, that's probably just why that's loading up. The first thing I was going to talk about is about how long, you know, you should allow for a promo to take. If you're cutting a sort of, you know, 3:27 promo, which is single length, or, you know, also called a radio edit, then you really want to allow 3 days minimum to, you know, get that together. And really the first day of that is sort of prepping and selecting. You know, and those are going to be long days. But I'd say, you know, roughly by the third day, you have a, you know, reasonably defined or refined edit for sending off to the client. But I always kind of like taking a bit of time on the fourth day, once you've had a good night's sleep, just to go through and refine all your edit points and have that little final sort of flurry and play. But I suppose the thing that happens a lot today is that people give you rushes one day and they want an edit the next day, and realistically, you can do an edit that's fast, but it's not going to be a good edit. So it's, a lot of this is about educating sort of production companies now, or, young producers on, how long things take, and, and to be reasonable about it. Okay, hold on, we're just getting back in. So let me just get this lined up. So I can share this screen. All right. Oh, I've got it set out so I can show you things really quickly.
No, don't miss the Avid interface, I can tell you that much.
This is the old one. I haven't got a new one on this computer yet. But, it's not bad. I'll show you some tricks in a minute, Kat.
I'm good, thanks.
We've been arguing all week about Premiere versus Avid, just FYI.
Okay.
The old.
Yeah, I did realise. Sorry, guys, I did realise it. And this was advertised as a Premiere, workflow. But all these things are transferable to whatever non-linear machine you're working in. It really doesn't matter. It's all just about sort of techniques, really. Okay, so the first thing that I would say when you get a promo is the sort of marking up your track. Okay, so if you have a look at this track here, I'll just expand this out. You can see that it's been sort of marked up for various beats and various points. So we got sort of the start of.
Is this your Foles video, Simon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, just hold on. So we got sort of the verses, and then we got where the chorus starts, where different chorus starts, and then if I spin along here, I've got the next chorus coming in here. So I know that each of those points are "I see a man," and then all the yellow ones are exactly the same. And sort of, actually, I can't point at the screen here. Sort of all the green ones down below are sort of all the bass hits and whatever musical instruments are in your piece, really. I've sort of highlighted the middle 8 section, which comes in here, and then any various elements. Again, we've got like a little chorus. So I see a man again. Can you hear that? Okay, or
yeah, I can hear it, but just talk us through it, like
okay,
because it's too small on the screen to really see properly. Okay,
so all the white dots. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, it's not that big, is it? Okay, so all these white dots here are I've marked these up in the track, and they're all the same. So the line there is "when I see a man," and then all the yellow dots, which are just afterwards, are the next line. And then all the purpley type ones are all the sort of verses, basically. So anyway, so I'm using markers to identify verses, choruses, and any other musical sort of change or element that I desire, and I do that throughout the whole track. And what that gives you is just a guide of how that track works. Not to say that I'm going to use all those beats and cut on all those beats. It's just giving me the flow for the track. The other thing that you want to do before you start is get a lyric sheet, and then mainly these are normally available online now if you can't get it through the production. And one of the things actually going through this process that you really should check is to make sure you get the right version of the track. Now this has happened to me once, and they shot with a different version basically, and there was a new version. So there is a few complexities in that you have to deal with a little bit later when some things, the tempo slightly changes, or something like that. So always make sure that the track you've got is also the track they're shooting with, and everyone's on the same page. One other thing to do with music is that if they're trying to shoot at a slow-mo rate, then your track needs to be slightly faster. So there's plenty of companies which, you know, you can go to Audio Houses, or there is other companies that do it, and they will speed up the track to what frame rate you need to shoot at. So, you know, wherever it may be, 30, 33, 36, 50, you know, however fast you're going or however slow you're going. But I would always make sure that those are done professionally, because if you don't do it professionally, you will get a bit of distortion and you can get a bit of travel in the audio. And if you're playing it out on set, that sounds awful. And then also sometimes what happens now is that that's used as guide audio on quite a lot of clips as well. And, you know, if you haven't got any claps or anything like that, then you have no way of knowing what speed they've shot at, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It just becomes a bit of a nightmare. So just with audio speed changes, always get it done professionally, just because it makes such a difference. And also, if the artist is trying to sing that, it's much more clearer for them to be able to sing it and pick it up as well. Because otherwise you'll be taking frames out here, there and everywhere just to kind of keep it in, basically. Or you know, motion effects, you know, like time warps and stuff like that, just to nick frames out, just to put them back in again. Okay, so in essence, in this kind of section, the start of the promo is, you know, get to know your track, understand how it flows, and understand how it feels. Okay, so I've done a couple of key points on that. So sort of loading and organizing. I think everyone, hopefully you can see that. Let's just go full screen so I can see what you're seeing on that one. Kat, can you see those bin names okay or not?
No, they're too small. I think you should just talk it through. Don't worry about the visuals.
Right, okay. Right, so I've got, obviously I have rushes that kind of come in. On this promo, actually, I've kind of got a multitude of stuff. So I actually shot on 16mm. I've got some drone footage, I've got some phantom footage, and I've got further 16mm. So these have all been sort of loaded in, you know, and they're in a bin. And what I will then do is, obviously the performance stuff gets sunk up to the track. Luckily on this stuff, it all has slates. So let me just pick that up.
Simon, I would say don't worry about looking at your Premiere project and moving stuff around, because I can't see anything really. I would just talk through it.
Right,
Very small.
We can see clip thumbnails.
Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, no, so I'll get bigger. So hold on. So let's go to stacks. Yeah. Okay, so let me just sidestep, and then let's just deal with, so all the rushes that kind of come in that aren't sync, you know, I'll break those down into, you know, sort of scenes, basically. Hopefully you can see those there. So I've got my kind of swim section. I've got the stuff with the sort of man and the dog here jumping. You can just see that, basically. And I've got some drone shots. So that's all my non-sync, and that's just been broken down into breakdown bin. My other clips are then from this setup here, which is the performance. So that's all then been sort of sunk into clips. And then there's two processes here which you can do, which is kind of group them, multi-group them, but I'm going to use stacks, basically. So the stacks are, hold on, let's see.
So what is,
You're okay?
what are you saying a stack is?
Right, yeah, hold on. So let me just get this here. Okay, so, right, let me just get back on point here. Right, so, okay, you've gone through labeling clips, haven't you?
Yeah, I would
miss that.
about that.
Yeah, okay, so let's not go through that. I mean, everybody kind of does the same. You know, you label your clip with close-up, mid-shot. With promos, it's just going to be what the band is, whether it's, you know, with the band where it's the singer, in this case it's Yanis, or, you know, that band member, or, you know, whatever it may be. Okay, so now I've done all that. Now the main thing with promos is that you want to have sort of, you'd be able to, you know, go backwards and forwards between your, you know, your rushes, your selects, you know, further breakdowns, or whatever it may be. So the one way of doing that is to have your timelines matching, basically. So I always set my timelines to 09, 59, 30, with my track starting at 10 hours. Now, the 10 hours is just an old kind of adage from sort of TVTX days. So, you can obviously have that as, 01. The main thing is that it starts on a round number, but you'll find that most WAVs from the sort of music houses, the music people will actually have a burnt-in time code of 10 hours. So I start my sequences like that. So that gives me 30 seconds pre-roll at the front, and then everything is sunk up to that 10 hours or wherever the clip may start, I suppose. Now, what that allows you to do is to flick backwards and forwards between both timelines, and you can lock them together. So I'll get onto that in a little minute, but the main thing is that I've now labeled up or stacked everything up at the right point, and they're all in sync. So then what I'm going to do is go through and really sort of select those performances. So in this instance, there's actually 16mm clips where they actually shot kind of quite fluid. So there's no kind of close up, and there's no mid shot, per se. The camera's just moving around the whole performance space. So to sort of resolve that and know where my rushes are, I've kind of gone through and then selected all those, just key elements. So here we just have sort of the band, this particular band member, which is the keyboard player. Anything that kind of relates to him, basically. In this one, you'll see there's a lot more of the main performer, who's Yanis. So all these clips, I've gone through and selected everything that I like from the big stack system. So the stacks is just all the takes layered up, basically. So I've gone through that. Here I've got the wide shots.
Would you recommend, Simon, laying down a wide as a base, or how?
Yeah. Hold on, I'll get to that. Okay. So now I've gone through and selected that. To start. I've got time here. So okay. So here you'll see that I've basically just laid down the main performance and a few other elements that I've done, but you can just see on the V1 here, it's literally just the close-up. So I've that's on this one I've chosen to do that. Sometimes you choose to do a wide if you've got all your band members in, but this one I've chosen just to go mainly with the close-up. So this is the start program. This is assembly 1, and then from my non-rushes, which I've kind of pre-selected a bit, I've then just dropped in a few clips just to start the story going. Okay, now if I just flick through my assemblies, you'll just see how I start to build this edit. So assembly 2, I've started to put in more elements. Okay. And again, I'm just going to flick through that. You'll just see the timeline changing. And then I'm just going to show you what I mean by working in stacks. So you'll see that stuff lifts up. So this is a good one to actually show. So if I've got a stack, then they're all linked, basically. They're all running the same time code. So that means I can load it into the source monitor and then cut into the record monitor at the same time. So if I just bring up select performance now, I'm just going to put Yanis into here. Okay. Now I've realized it's probably because I've got a 4K monitor running here. That's probably not that good. So you can't see the time codes in the middle at the top, but
So how are you syncing them up, Si?
okay, so here I just basically you can just lock your source and record monitor back together. So I've just done that, and what you can just see me dragging that up and down. So that is now completely locked. So anywhere on this sequence where I put an in or out point, I can cut across and I know that's in sync. Obviously we've got a dog there at that point, but that's kind of other elements. So I can just drag that down and I can cut any performance from the, from the source point here, into that part of the sequence, and that will be in sync basically.
Cool.
Okay. Now, one good thing about sort of labeling up your track is that you can then sort of use choruses or verses at different points if you need it, and that's why I kind of use the stack system of going through and selecting, because something at the front might not work there at that point, but it could work midway or towards the end. So it kind of it really does sort of chop and change. But that's the basic premise of doing it, and what it means is that you can just really fast access anything really quickly, and it's going to be in sync. And then I'll just click through these, and you can just see that I lift stuff up the top and I don't want it, and then delete it, and you can just see things sort of chopping and changing as I've added stuff in or moved stuff around. And then as I get a bit later, I do start to simplify the edit, bring stuff down again, and then add other stuff basically.
Do you working to a WAV rather than an MP3 and things like that?
Pardon?
Are you working to a WAV?
Oh yeah. So that was actually one thing I've missed off the front there. Yeah. So I always ask for a WAV or AIF because that's uncompressed. You don't read on MP3. You won't be able to hear everything. It's always better to hear it in a WAV or MP3. Okay, one last bit which I was just going to talk about, which was thinking. Yeah. Okay. So here we go. So which is another way of editing, and that is by way of multicam. So in Avid, and I'm sure in Premiere you can do this as well, you can group your clips. So I can group all the takes together for close up, mid shot, wide. I can group entire setups, whatever it may be. You can group it. The one thing you can do in Avid is edit in multicam mode, which is where you kind of click this button here, and what this is doing is playing all those sort of takes, and where I've got the green line, I can then click that onto the next one, which doesn't seem to be working at the moment.
What about up down button? That normally works, doesn't it? Sometimes. Yeah,
it normally works in the time. Oh, hold on, that's why. Yeah, I didn't have the video clicked on. That's why. Okay, yeah, you can work up down. Use the upper arrow keys. Now, the one beauty of sort of multicam is that you can play this edit, and I can edit on the fly. So if I play this, hit F5, I'm just going to do a few edits very quickly. Okay, you'll just see there that in that space, I've already just done 3 or 4 edits down the bottom there. They're not great ones because I'm just doing it on sync, and you can see there's a couple of edits in there. But you can basically either swap out your shot here, or just pick stuff as you're playing it through. And this is a good technique once you've kind of got an edit, because you can have all your close-ups playing all at once. And if you're really looking for something really specific, you can just sort of pick it out. So that's really the two ways of kind of editing a promo, or having everything in sync basically. Just with the stacks, you can obviously you can still just pop back to your selects, and pull stuff away. And the reason why I do that is that I find you get to know your footage well, you get to know your artists, how they sort of perform, and really you just find any little gems, just sort of lying around, at the end, or of sort of takes. You always, there might be a little nice little portrait there, which I don't know that's been captured or something, or in this case, there's a few sort of out frames, bits and pieces. Okay, so I've done syncing, multicam. Okay, so yeah, so that's kind of the basic of it, really. And then we'll probably take any questions, and all that. I was going to say, one of the funniest things is that all that kind of works well until Richard Daskoff walks in and says, "Oh, we just want it on long takes." and then he literally just wants 3 shots. So you could do all that work, and then your director comes in and goes, no, just give me 3 shots, and then you got to try and hide some edits somehow. Okay, so generally, are we all right for time, Kat, or should I just wrap up?
If you close your screen share, if you want to just kind of say a few little tips and tricks, and then we'll wrap up in the next couple minutes.
Oh, I don't know.
Cool. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if I'm back on now.
You are.
Okay, I'm back on. Okay. So yeah, so I'm going to down to the bottom here. So really, I've got just a couple of things. Really, is I think my pet hates for music videos is when you have to, when you're asked in session, you just to cut on the beat all the time, and it's happened quite a few times. It's kind of come back to me and go, oh, please cut on the beat, cut on the beat, cut on the beat, and it's like every other beat. It's like I'm cutting on maybe every 4th beat or or 8th beat or wherever it may be, just because when you get your cut so tight, it's just like you just don't really interact with the artist. You're kind of doing the opposite of what they're asking, really. I mean, it's more of an American thing. I mean, not to say there is times where that works. It's just that if you do it all the time, it just becomes a bit of a blur, really. And I kind of think that my philosophy for videos or for music videos is that every minute you need a new setup, really, or you need a new introduce something new that might just be the way you cut, the beats that you cut on, or you choose to cut on, sort of effects that you choose to use, or sort of a transition, or the selection of shots that you use. It's just a style thing, really. If you haven't got a different setup, it's because it's really just because after 30-40 seconds, people do switch off, and you really got to keep people moving and keep the edit interesting, and and sometimes you really have to work on it to make that work. Yeah, I think pardon?
Especially if you've only got one setup.
yeah, exactly.
Effects shots can I bosh in from
and it's how many different ways can you use that footage to work with. On this one, I had to cut 2 versions. One had a narrative, which was with the dog running and stuff like that, and the other one was a performance piece. And the performance piece is just in one room, so it's like how do you keep that going? So in this one, the track was really quite forceful in that there was a build and then a lull and then a build again, and really we just kind of really used that. And each time the build got increased, so it got heavier and heavier and quicker and quicker and quicker and more dramatic and more kind of raw, basically. And that's the aim of that one. So that's the kind of device carrying you through. So in those lulls, you're playing with different ways to slow it all down, and then you sort of kick off again. So I think with each promo, it's really led by treatment, how many setups, how many characters, what the story might be, the performance of the lead singer, and what kind of wide shots you have for the bands, to kind of which allow you to kind of start that promo with, and then it's really just kind of like building in and working with it, really, and not afraid to just try things, really. Sometimes I will play the intro first to get a feeling for it, and then start to build the edit. Or there might just be one really particular section. In this one, it was the dog jumping. So key moments, you put in where the dog's running, because that's the build up to him being hit. So you might just do those bits first and then start with the other elements. So it's really just it's just keeping the process free and fluid, and have your ideas flowing, really. Don't lock yourself in so quickly to an edit. And that's really, and that goes back to really having a bit of time, just to kind of have a play, and stuff through, really. That's really it, I suppose. I think I kind of got most of the stuff on my sheet, but having it crash was probably not on the sheet, put it that way.
No, that's great.
Right, there we go.
Let's do some questions and answers. Keeling, do you want to unmute as well?
Yeah.
Great. Cool.
Are you happy to read them out, Kat, or do you want me to do it for you?
Oh yeah, if you could read them out. Sorry, I don't know where they are. Where are they?
Okay, cool.
No,
That's fine. No worries. So this was put in at about 8 o'clock. So can you go over how you've set up your scratch discs / other project preferences / settings on your machine? Sarah, I think that one's for you. Is that a bit of a long question in terms of how to answer it?
I can answer it very quickly. That's okay.
Go ahead.
I mean, there's a lot of like theory about this kind of stuff, but I would just say ideally keep your media on the fastest drive you have available, because that's where you're going to be, that's where you want your speed, because Premiere's or Avid is trying to really pull that as fast as possible. So yeah, test your drives, find the fastest drive, get your media on there, keep your projects separate. It's partly just for safety, just keeping everything separate. In terms of scratch discs, I guess for things like media, again, it would be the ideal setup would be another drive that you can be writing your media cache to or your render cache to. Yeah, keeping things separate and using fastest drives as possible, really, is kind of the short answer.
Perfect, thanks. This is again for you, Sarah. Can you explain a bit more in depth about what you meant by being careful about audio when creating your proxies?
Yeah, so Premiere has this really frustrating issue with, despite the fact that you're making proxies really just for the visual elements of the media, you have to really watch that your the proxies that you're making match the raw media in terms of the number of audio channels. So you can find that in Premiere. So if you go into the project window, open it up, get your find the audio channel column, I guess, check it, because often, say, like, again, I think it's either Alexa or FS7 is quite frequently has 5 audio channels built into the footage. And so if you make all your proxies with a preset that's, say, got 2 channels, when you've made all those proxies and it's taken 3 hours to make them, when you try and link those back into Premiere, it will come up with a little like error message that says you haven't got matching audio channels, therefore you can't use any of these proxies. So yeah, that's just make sure that your preset for when you're making your proxies matches the number of audio channels. But if you Google that, there'll be way more information about it.
Okay, amazing, thanks. And Danny's asking, just to clarify, did you say that you have sound and video on 2 separate drives and then project files on the desktop?
No, I would keep sound and video can stay all together. That's fine. And yeah, I tend to keep my project files in like the documents folder in Finder. I'd keep things off you probably mean desktop in terms of computer, but I would keep everything off your desktop, particularly on Mac, because it really has a weird thing of slowing it down.
Yeah.
But yeah, keep it separate.
Okay, great. So I'm actually going to open this up to the 3 of you. Can you share your favorite cannot work without shortcuts?
Oh, mine's my slip 1 frame forward or slip 1 frame back, because once I have the edit and it's locked to the times, usually I just want to move my ins and outs, try different things, and I think the slipping tool, where you just hover over, press the button, you can try and see how much you've got on the front and the end. It's very easy. That's my favorite.
Cool. Simon?
I think mine's going to be working with a Wacom pen. I think that adds for about 50% more speed. So I'm going to go with that one.
Okay, amazing. Actually, that question has actually been asked at most rough assembly talks over the last couple of weeks, and you're the first one to bring the pen in. So well done.
More about the Wacom, you said that someone can't grab it. Or was it you, Sarah, was saying that you can't grab it like someone tries to take over your mouse and your keyboard when you've got a Wacom?
I think someone asked a question about similar to this, actually. I saw a comment on an editor Facebook group a while ago where someone was like, how do you deal with directors that want to get into your edit? And some directors know what they're doing, and it's fine, but this person replied that they use a Wacom purely because people, if you're not used to it, literally can't use it, and so it stops anyone touching a machine, which is a bit extreme, but that's what some people do.
The other thing you can do with that is that you can just put it in your pocket when you walk out of a room, and then no one can do anything, basically.
Yeah.
Sarah, what was your favourite shortcut?
I guess one I use nearly all the time is just match frame. I think it's F I think the default on Premiere is F. Just to flip back to the full clip of whatever is in your source or your program monitor. Yeah, match frame is my go-to. I use it constantly.
Great. Okay, thank you. Okay, how do you manage the footages that you have in different formats, i.e. codecs? Do you transcode all of them to one format?
I do, yeah. I make ProRes, LTs. That's what my online workflow is. I like to work in ProRes, LTs, unless there's some kind of, heavy VFX in the offline edit and I need to be working to something more high quality, because I'll be punching in a lot. Usually, by the time you're transcoding, if you're going to need to do that, and you've discussed it with your director and asked what kind of quality they want to work with. And you might have to get a better machine or work around that kind of thing, but that should definitely be discussed before you transcode. Like, if there's anything you need to punch into and it needs to be a higher res for your offline.
Yeah. So do we interject there as well?
Yeah, if you'd like to, go ahead. Yeah.
So I think there's really no need to work in sort of full res really. It will slow down sort of your editing time, whether you're just editing small clips or long clips, or you need to render effects and stuff like that. The thing is though, it will start out okay, but as soon as your edit gets more and more complicated, it will start to slow it down. So really you should be working in sort of proxies or in Avid, you do DNxDs, 36s or 120s, and basically that brings down the megabit rate to 36 or to 120. And if your drive's running at maybe, depending on the connection, 3.5 gigabytes per second or 5 gigabytes per second, up and down travel, then you can see that how much data you're going to go backwards and forwards. But my last job I had a clip that was 258 gig, because it was an interview and they just left it running, and then there was no break on the camera, where it broke every 10 minutes, created its own self camera. Self sub clip, sort of, so when you link it together, they're all separate. So, it's like, what are you going to do with that? There's just no way you can edit with that. So yes, making sort of proxies and smaller versions is definitely the way to go. And if the producer tells you that's not the way, have a word, because it will just slow down the entire job all the way. And it's so easy now just to switch back to master files like that, that you just don't need to do it. And if there is one shot they need to do effects, you just put that one shot in. Export it out or do your effects, whatever it may be. So there we go.
Okay, great. Kat, James, this is for you. Someone's curious to know a bit more about what you meant by working to an online and offline cut, and also what's it like working with agencies.
Okay, two-parter. So the first part, offline, online, I think is, it's definitely the way we used to talk about it when I learned as an assistant, that you always create a lower quality, like what Simon was saying, file that you work from in, back then it was the Avid, so that it was, as you said, a really speedy workflow. Your project's not going to get too big, not too slow. It's not going to have problems with the visual effects, with playing back sound. So as long as you transcode everything to a lower quality and work with those offline proxy files, depending what you want to call it, you should have a pretty smooth workflow to then, when you get to the end of your project and you finish your edit and it's locked, then you just reconnect back to your online full res files or new masters if you had to make them. And it is literally a click now. You just select everything and then click off. In Premiere, you just click offline media, remember not to delete it, and then you just reselect a new folder, the folder where hopefully the files are exactly the same file names, and as Sarah said, the same audio tracks. That's really important because it doesn't like to connect to media that's slightly different. And then you've got your online files. But of course there's just the problems with this. For instance, if you're working in different frame sizes, you'll have to duplicate your cut before you do this, and make sure that you go back through and resize all the shots that are bigger back to, or make sure your new sequence is the right framing for what you're outputting as a deliverable. But that's basically what I mean, like connecting the media to the proxies. And then the second bit, working with agencies. Simon, got some.
What was the question?
What's it like working with agencies?
It kind of varies, really. It varies per job, I think. They can be tricky, and I suppose just trying to think of like a scenario, really.
I like agencies, to be honest. Yeah. I find that they're usually like okay, as long as you have a good producer that's with you, helping you with the agency, and they've got your back. That's what matters. I think it's the director, producer, editor team that if you're solid and you're all on the same page, then when it comes to talking to the agency, then you should not have a problem. Yeah, problematic agencies. I'm just trying to think. Any example?
Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll let you think about it and then we can come back to it shortly. Okay, I'm going to do another one for Sarah, and then Simon, I'm going to come to you with a Simon-specific question. Is that okay? Sarah, do you have any good and interesting resources on the principles of quickly cutting GBS/SEQs? I do a lot of longer form CA news features where using the pics and music to set up the mood is required, but want to stop the faff and trailing sequences and generally speed up. Are there any tips or sites you'd recommend for a bit of study, please?
Yeah, so I read this one earlier actually. I think what you're asking is how to sort of like skip past the really intense, in-depth setup of a project and just get cut quickly. I think I have a shortcut in Premiere where I take an entire bin of clips and I drag it into the source monitor. If I don't want to build string outs, which I think is what you're saying, and then I think I use T, Y, and U on the keyboard, and Y I've set this up so that Y and U flip between like the next clips in the source monitor, and it's just a really easy way of flicking through all the clips in one bin basically, and then you can just in and out and insert those into a sequence, so you get all your selects built in one sequence really quickly without having to pull all the media in. So you basically get yourself a select sequence immediately. And when I'm on jobs where I don't have the time to do all this and I just need it cut within, sometimes it's like if you're on set and you need a select reel immediately, that's kind of my go-to for doing it. So yeah, pulling clips into the source monitor and flicking through and in-outing from there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, Simon, Ariadna is saying you talked about changing the frame rate of the track professionally. Why and when would you need to do this?
Okay, so what I was talking about, I meant the frame rate that they were shooting at. Basically, your track would always be, running at 25, probably, or for obviously for America, it might be slightly different, it might be 24 or something. But I meant that, the frame rate that they would shoot the image at. So, if they're shooting at 30 frames per second to get a slow-mo effect, then they would, speed the track up slightly. Or, sometimes 33. So that's the only time you would do it. Or if they were trying to get some sort of effect where just at, certain points, the faster you get, the more words are going to be sort of out, or the singer won't be able to, sing it anyway. But it's just that when say if you took a 30 or 33, when you put it back to 25, the singer will become slow-mo. But if you sped up your track, then it will be in sync with your track at 25. So that's kind of when it would happen.
Yeah. Okay, great. There's another one for you, Simon, as well, about the source and sequence monitor locking, and locking it in sync to build the main edit. Is this possible in Premiere?
I think it is, but I think I'm going to have to defer to the Premiere ladies there.
I mean, I use Avid and Premiere, and I'm not sure how you do it in Premiere. I'm not sure, sorry.
You can do it in Premiere, and I'm just looking for the exact button now.
I think I looked at it myself because I was trying to work out, how to do it on my migration
program, that's it. If you go to your screw drive, is it the kind of the icon that looks like a spanner? If you go to that in your source monitor, make sure your timelines and your cursors are in the right place so that they're in sync. And if you go to your spanner in your source under your monitor, you've got gang source, and that's where you would do it there.
Did not know that.
So that will work really well with the pancake layers that Sarah was talking about earlier.
You heard it here first, people. Okay, Kat, actually, this might be a good one for you. You love the work boundaries. How do you deal with directors who, instead of explaining what they want, grab your mouse and change the edit themselves?
I've actually had this quite a few times, and I've had all sorts. I even had one music promo director sit behind me and only communicate through growls and barks like a dog. I had to deal with that with a smile and get through a really hard edit day. So how do you get through it? I personally, I mean, everyone has a different way of dealing with it. Like, I try not to get annoyed, even though it's rude and they shouldn't do it. And I think most of the time they're just frustrated and they can't articulate themselves. So they feel like if they jump on, they could do it quicker, and you just let them, because soon enough they'll realize that it's your keyboard shortcuts and your Premiere workspace, and they won't know where anything is or how to do anything, and they'll suddenly feel really stupid, and then they'll give it back to you. So usually just let them have their time, and you will get your keyboard back. And usually I make a joke to let them know that it was not okay.
Great. Sarah?
Sorry, can you say the question again? Sorry.
Yeah. So, how would you deal with a director who kind of comes along into your space, and instead of asking you and explaining to you what they want changed, they just take up the mouse and start clicking away as and how they like?
Well, so I maybe have a different perspective, because I used to direct a little bit, so I kind of understand the new control. But I think it's a respect thing to an editor, ideally, to not do that. But if you are going to do that as the editor, I would interject immediately and just duplicate the sequence. Give them their own sequence. I did this with a producer recently where he was quite hands-on with that Avid, which was fine, and he just wanted to play around himself, and so I just made him his own little bin with duplicates of all the sequences, so that he could just do whatever he liked. And then if he had something good to bring over, we could bring it over, but otherwise it kind of preserved the cuts as they were, so that he didn't kind of make any mistakes or anything, because he wasn't that used to the program.
Yeah. Great. Okay, thanks. God, you're all so much more polite, and I would yeah, that's the trade unionist in me. I think I wouldn't be into it. Simon, go ahead.
I'm not into it, don't get me wrong.
We were talking about this earlier, and it's sort of looking after rooms and stuff like that, and we kind of came around to the conclusion that it is really the job of an editor to keep that room running, and kind of just being calm with it, really. I mean, at the end of the day, they could grab it, but they're not really going to they're not really going to damage that much, really, to your edit or whatever. And like Sarah said, just duplicate it, let them have a play, really. And yeah, I think it's just about that. It's just keeping the room sort of going, and not being too defensive about it or angry, because no one likes that in a room, basically. Because you could be working with this person for 3 or 4 weeks, and and if they've done it on day 2 and you've already, it's not going to work, is it really? So you really just have to, just take it on the chin, if that's,
yeah.
Learn a lot of patience, Nia.
Yeah. Okay, so it seems like a lot of people on here use Premiere and are kind of being taught through Premiere in university. So this is a good question for you all, actually. How do you cope jumping between different edit softwares on different jobs? And is there any advice that you could give to people?
Yeah, I could definitely say that I was 6 years an Avid editor, and then I left an edit house that only worked in Avid and I went freelance, and I realized I had to learn Premiere because all the jobs were Premiere, like 95%. I moved over to Premiere, got used to it. It took me like about 3 months, and then preferred Premiere. I was getting all my practice in it. I was getting faster in it. And if the job came in and it was on Avid, I would really, really have to think about how fast I would be going back, because for me, if it's a very quick job, that would be quite difficult. I would take about 2 or 3 days to get back up to speed, because I'm used to working another way. And I think it's fair to put your hands up and say that if it is the case. And I do, and I generally say, like, I don't really want to work in Avid, and it shouldn't really be a problem. I think you should get to decide what software you work in, and it's okay if you don't want to switch between the two. And one thing I would definitely say is always double check it's a Mac if you're a Mac user, because I once got put on a PC job, an Avid PC job.
Yeah.
It's not.
Brilliant. Okay. Simon, have you got anything else to say?
Yeah, I think I'd do a bit to that. I mean, I'm kind of coming from the other way. So I've been doing Avid for 20 years. So migrating to Premiere, has been like a little step-by-step process. And I've started just doing, little jobs that kind of come in and do those on Premiere, and then ask Kat any questions, basically. And then you sort of build up, your sort of complexity of edits, because you learn all your sort of effects and how things work and stuff, that as you kind of build up, really. And then the other thing I was just going to say is that it shouldn't be a problem these days with what system you're working on. And if they really want something you to work on one system, what I say is I will put it back in that system for you at the end. So you have your final cut in Premiere or your final cut in Avid, whichever one you want. Because sometimes, a job will come in and the schedule's really tight, and I know that I'm 10 times faster in Avid. So I know I need to do an Avid, but they want it in Premiere because it's going to be back on their server, and they're going to want to do tweaks 2 months down the line, or whatever, client revisions, and wherever it may be. So I always then just say, look, I'll just put it back in Premiere for you, and then I just supply them with a Premiere project where everything back in, basically. It's so easy now just to convert projects backwards and forwards that, like Kat said, it's not a problem.
Yeah. Okay, great. If you're asked to create transcripts, especially with longer projects, what are the more efficient ways to create them, besides just sitting down and writing it all out?
I mean, there is software that exists that will sort of listen to your audio files and write them, but it's varying success of how well it works. I suppose whenever I've had to do it in the past, again, I do that thing where I was saying before about listening at double speed if you can, but typing at the same time is maybe a bit difficult. Ideally it's done kind of for you, or, rope people in if it's like a low budget kind of thing. That's kind of how, like, I worked on a feature a few years ago where we had just like days and days of interviews. So the only way we got it done was with a team. That's kind of it, really.
Yeah, I'd recommend that. I'd always say get a team involved, get the producer to organise someone to sit and go through it, so that it's not taking time away from your edit. I think that's the priority, to make sure that you can work, at the same time, so you're not losing any kind of edit time.
Yeah.
Simon? To get it outsourced, basically, you'll send off your audio files and you'll have it back in the morning, because just if someone's paying you X amount a day, it's a lot cheaper for them just to send out those audio files and and get it back. You don't spend your whole day writing it, basically.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, actually. So if you were being engaged for a job and they wanted you to do the transcripts, would you actually kind of organize and negotiate that before you take the job, that actually that needs to go to someone external?
I would, in terms of if they wanted me to do it, I would say this is the way it's going to be. This is the way you kind of really want to do this process. Whether I take that cost on and sort it out myself, I suppose that's the kind of question at that point. But normally,
find someone cheaper. They can usually find like a brother, mother, friend, someone who is not charging, and they can make that work. Usually, I would just not ever say you would do it. If you don't have time, don't take that on, not your job.
Okay, good. I think that's good for maybe the kind of new entrants who are on this call to know that as as a good boundary. Okay, this is actually a really relevant question in terms of where everyone's working at the moment. Do you have any tools you use for remote collaboration, i.e. sharing edits and getting feedback?
I mean, I'm about to start a remote job in a way that I haven't done before. So I'm about to do a long, I mean, this isn't short form, it's long form, but the same principle applies. Myself and the other editor are going to be, we're working remotely, and we're going to be logging in by our own computers, using the internet to log into an edit suite in a Soho post house. So we're like safe for now. And using the power of that computer and just using our own computers as like an interface. But in terms of how we're going to communicate, we've discussed sort of having like WhatsApp desktop open all the time, using Slack maybe, lots of phone calls probably. We're going to be working in the same, and this is Avid again, but it's working in the same project as Avid. You do the same in Premiere with and that's, I think, something that's going to be coming into the new version of Premiere, or it's already in, is like a more advanced version of like collaboration. Yeah, there's lots of ways. It's just keeping lines of communication open, I suppose.
Yeah, I like to use Vimeo comments. That's something that I already pay for Vimeo as a hosting, like a pro. So I use, I've got a pro account, so it's got like a, you know, an element where you can, you know, you can ask them to write comments at certain points through the upload link that you sent them, if that's where you're hosting your videos to send to your clients. I also use WeTransfer, but I would say that the best way, I've tried Frame.io, but I personally didn't like it, and it's quite expensive, but it's whatever works. I actually just like sending cuts and getting like time-coded responses, and that actually just frees you up quite a bit from, you know, looking too much at an edit that someone's commented on underneath and all that kind of you know, I personally just like getting time-coded things, and I could put a time code in the bottom corner of my offline just so that they know exactly what they're looking at.
Okay, great. This is a question moving kind of loosely related. When editing from home or in a different room to the producer or journalist, and a producer asked for a quick comp of best GVS, I have no idea what that means. Please tell me that you do. From my camera cards after a few days shoot, what would you recommend sending them? A decent rough cut, or just a few tights and wides and a few seconds of action from each location?
I mean, I think they mean GVs, like general views, like B-roll kind of stuff. I suppose things like that, I would always just go back and ask and find out, because the worst thing is if you send them too little or too much, and then they come back and then you have to redo it. I guess people don't always want to show everything, but I don't know. And if you're in Premiere, I would, you know, set up a sequence of whatever you think you need, and then have it export in the background with Media Encoder if you're fast enough, if your computer's fast enough to deal with that. Just save you some time.
I would always, when I'm exporting, no matter what, to be honest, I would always set up and send multiple edits to Media Encoder. Instead of using your Premiere to export, I would always make sure you're just sending them into Encoder, because it gives you the flexibility to go in and change things, and you're not just stuck with a paused editing platform. I just say default, just never do that. And also I set up Encoder so that it sets off automatically, so I don't have to go into Encoder. I have it to set to like 25 seconds, and it gives me enough. If I need to change something, I can go in there and change it, and if not, then it just sets off, and I have a ding when they're all finished, so I can go and check them. So it's a nice little reminder, and it's separate, but it's quite handy.
Okay. Simon, do you have any point on that, or do you want to come in on the next question, which is...
No, the guys covered that. So.
Yeah, okay. Do you all usually work from home, and what are your remote editing setups, and do you have any tips?
I actually missed some stuff out that I wrote on edit suites, so I could probably pitch in here. So I work, I'd say 50% from home, 50% in new locations I'd never been to before. For new locations, when you turn up and it's a new suite, always make sure you have your shortcuts on an email that you can access, or a USB key, like with you at all points. forever, and your workspace settings, always keep them somewhere in the cloud so that you can always get them if you need them wherever you are. And I always take my keyboard wherever I go, my color-coded short keyboard. There's get one, or get the stickers if you can't afford one. And I always take my own mouse, and obviously that's like hygiene as well, especially now. And tips are, always ask where the loo is, if you need a fob to get in or out, because you get stuck in places, what the Wi-Fi is, of course. And if you're working from home, I would say always make the room comfortable and have a second monitor. Make sure that your client can see your second monitor, and you've got your monitor that you're working to the edit in right in front of you, so that people aren't necessarily looking at what you're doing all the time. You can just show them that one projecting screen, and you can control that screen and what you want them to see and what you don't want them to see. So 2 monitors always. I would never work on 1 monitor, even in house, anywhere. I would just not be okay with that. I'd bring one in if I had to. Always just make sure you're telling this goes back to the working with agencies, actually. Always talk about how long you think your edit's going to take, how long you're going to be that day, what time you want people in, to call you first to check you're okay. Like, be so over the top with communication about how long you think things will take, and tell the producer always if you need more time. I think that's always really important. If you've got a client presentation, you've got somebody coming in and say the computer's crashed 5 times, it's okay to say, like, can we delay it? What's your timeline like? All that kind of thing. Like, just have make sure no one's in the room with you if they don't have to be, and if they do have to be, give them something to distract them with while you need to do stuff, so that you can focus and they're not trying to chat to you. So that's kind of my top tips.
Can we go in? No.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I was muted. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I think the question was about kit and stuff like that as well, wasn't it? Because Kat's covered all the other bits.
Yeah.
I think with kit, it kind of goes back to the proxy question earlier. Is that actually, if you work in proxies and stuff like that, then you don't need the top of the range computers all the time to kind of edit with. So if you're just starting out and stuff like that, that's one way to kind of keep the price of kit down, basically, by converting yourself down to proxies or encoding it into one format. So your GPU is not running at full kind of bandwidth or whatever it may be. So generally, I run a Mac Mini as the main sort of edit suite computer. And then I've got a laptop that I use for for like going on set and stuff like that, really. And then I've got a couple of monitors. I've got a client monitor. I'll just quickly do that. So that's kind of my main monitor there, and I've got a client one there. And then if I do have a director over, I have got a sort of monitor on the wall as well. So it kind of varies. You don't need all that. It's just literally having another monitor for your client, like Kat said. But yeah, I suppose my point was just, you don't need to buy the newest equipment all the time to keep up with it. If you manage your workflows, then you can use up to your budget, basically.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say a big thing that keeps happening to me recently is if you are in a shared space, like an open office, and I always try and ask, like, is there an edit suite? Is there a conference room somewhere I can work? If they haven't got that and they say, oh, you're in with everybody else, I always say, that's going to slow me down. I'm going to get distracted. Like, how am I going to sit with the director, and how am I going to listen to the rushes and hear it properly? We're going to have to get joint headphones. I kind of, I say, like, this is really not ideal, and please, can we find a way to resolve that somewhere? And I really try and push for that private space when you're going in-house somewhere and they haven't got that sorted out.
Yeah, and if you're not in a suite, it's a good point. Noise cancelling headphones.
Oh yeah, always.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sarah, what about you?
So my setup is, I think, similar to both of you. Like, I have a MacBook Pro that I link up to another monitor if I'm kind of a bit more mobile, and if not, I have if I'm kind of I have like a little studio space, because I go mad working from home, which is killing me at the moment. So if I'm in my studio space, I usually have I have a Mac Pro tower and 2 monitors. Again, with Kat, I need 2 monitors for brain space as much as like Premiere or Avid space. Yeah, I need space away from home personally. And then if I'm like working in a, I don't know, like a post house or a in-house at a production company or a brand or whatever, then again, I agree with Kat, like try and fight for your peaceful space, because it makes so much difference, and it makes the work better, so everyone wins really.
Yeah, it makes you quicker basically.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah. How do you look out if you've gone through long periods of time where you're working on a job from home? How do you look after your well-being? Because I think this is an important one, isn't it, for people who are new entrants or young in the industry, who are just so keen to get their foot on the ladder and get a kind of foot into the door. And, you know, often that means quite a lot of long days, usually for either low or no pay. So what would you say is the best way to look after people or after yourselves during long periods of working from home, but also generally actually as people in the industry?
One thing that I found that keeps me like sane if I'm ever like finding it really hard to focus and work from home, because working from home for me is a nightmare. It's tough. Some people love it, some people don't, but I use an app called I think it's called Forest, but there's loads of different ones, but it's basically based on the Pomodoro technique, which is working in 25-minute bursts, and it's I'll see if I can get it on my phone. It's downloading. It basically it forces you to work in little focused moments, and then as soon as it's done, you're free for like, even if it's 5 minutes, just walk out, you know, get away from your screen. I think I'm sure you guys agree, it's just having breaks and trying not to work all night, and you know, seeing what times of day work for you best, because some people work better in the morning, some people work better at night. Yeah, it's just staying sane by taking breaks, being focused when you can be, I suppose.
That sounds amazing. I want Forest. That would be good for me. Yeah. Can you actually, it would be good for all of us. Could you put it in the chat function, please, Sarah? Like a link. Thank you. Simon, what about you?
I think, you know, it's kind of the same really. You know, you do have periods where you work quite quickly. So, you know, you'll have a period in the morning, and then, you know, actually you'll get a lull around about midday because you've actually done 4 hours worth of work, or you know, however much it may be, and actually at that point your brain's telling you, you know, I need to have a break. So, you know, if you are working from home, you know, go outside, have your lunch hour, whatever it may be, and then come back, and you know, you will work quicker in the afternoon because you've kind of reset your brain. And I suppose with sometimes all-nighters, and you know, and I've done quite a few in my time, and you know, some of them are low budget jobs, some of them are high budget jobs, it really depends. You just try not to do them really, but obviously they do happen. And I think in that situation, then there becomes a point where you can't, you know, carry on. But I think the two tips is that just make sure you're far enough away from the screen as well. This I think is probably a top tip, is that you really want to be about a metre away from the screen. And what that does is allows your eyes to actually focus properly on the screen. If you get closer, then your eye doesn't focus properly all the time, which obviously can lead to problems with your eyes, but also it just makes you more tired. So if you're doing that for long periods, then you'll just get more and more tired, basically. So again, it's just, and you know, stepping away, but just make sure you are actually that distance away from your screen. Yeah.
Okay, Kat, what about you?
Yeah, I would say, you know, definitely your setup is really important. Like, I always make sure my monitor is, you know, at least like shoulder height above. So I always pile it on top of I've got lots of like, you know, laptop stands and everything else, and my monitor has to be high as well, because the more you're looking upright, the less you're kind of bent over, and you have to, you know, have a lifetime of yoga lessons to fix whatever you've done there. If you can't afford an expensive chair, there are these like amazing kind of like whoopee cushion things that you can sit on that you can buy for like a £10 or 20 off Amazon, and they're basically like a air-filled pillow that means that your back is constantly working to stay straight because you're building up the muscles. So actually, it's really good if you want to take it in house, but you do look like you've got hemorrhoids. I mean, for me, like tips for people starting out, I would say, like really, really starting out, for me, the best thing was shooting people, the website, finding some gigs on there. And I know there's Mandy, but I don't really rate Mandy. I know it's changed a lot recently, but shooting people I think is still quite good for collaborating when you're starting out. I met some really amazing directors on there. And it takes, it does take a couple of years to get one or two directors that they become your friend, and then that friend is someone that wants to sit with you for long periods of time on jobs. I think you genuinely have to have an interest in each other's lives and want to spend that time with each other. So friendship is important, and building
that's a good point,
is really important.
Yeah. That's actually such a great oh, sorry, Simon, go ahead.
I was just going to say, actually, if you're working on hard jobs or low paid jobs, then just pick those jobs carefully, basically, so that look at the treatment beforehand, look at stuff that they've shot, that director's shot as well, because I've done a couple of those situations where you end up taking on the job and it comes in and it's nothing like what you're expecting, basically, and you've still got to spend quite a lot of time to kind of get it somewhere. So just look at the director or and those elements first before you decide to take on that job. And with the money aspect, I was just going to say, always try not to do buyouts on those sort of situations, because that's when you find that people start to take advantage, because you said you'll do it for X amount a day, for the entire job, and I can imagine if you're getting started, there was a little bit of ambiguity there, really. On those.
Okay, that's actually a really great segue into the next couple of questions, which are going to be our last questions. There's actually something in there from Livia about color grading and balance sounding. Would someone be able to kind of take that offline so that we could
say briefly, as majority offline editors, I could speak for all of us and say that we all will put a Rec 709 on flat rushes to either to look through the selects, or just on the edit when or Simon, I know you go through and you do a pass of your edit once it's all kind of roughly not locked down. You just do a rough kind of grade for your offline, but obviously you strip it out and someone else grades it at the end. So I think you don't want to spend too much time on your grade. You just need to make it look viewable, and if it is viewable flat and that's how you prefer to work, then work on it flat. But normally if I've got a director in, they'll ask for it to have just a Rec 709 on it, unless it looks terrible, and then take it off.
Okay.
The question was about how much that's outsourced. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Because I think in smaller jobs, like I've mixed hundreds of my own edits in terms of sound, and I'm not a sound mixer, but often that does fall to you, particularly in the first few years. Like that's really common, especially in short form. Won't happen in long form, but in short it definitely will. And same for color. So it is, and I think if you're starting out, it does make you a hell of a lot more valuable if you can do a really basic grade. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but just understand the very basics of like exposure, color, temperature, all that kind of stuff. And the basics of sound. Again, you don't need to be an expert because that's not your job, but it's good to be able to do a basic.
I'm just going to say, so there's going to be a couple of other rough assembly talks actually in June, and a few of them are going to be covering post sound, and the others are going to be long form. So if you keep an eye out on that, then maybe if you want to learn a bit more about that, then that platform might be a better place for that question as well. Okay, last two questions. Is it absolutely necessary to join a post house to elevate your career as a short form editor?
Well, Simon and I did that. So Simon, what do you think?
I suppose it really depends on what sort of post house you're talking about, and where you are really at the moment, whether you're sort of at the assistant level or whether you've done assisting for X amount of years. I think in short form commercials it probably is, just to get in with the kind of workflows and sort of make connections really with other people at post houses. If you've got friends at the Mill or wherever it may be, NPC, that you might need to connect them on jobs and stuff where you've got a job and you need a favour or something, and they can get, like Sarah was just talking about, someone needs a little grade. You might do a low budget job and they might have a a junior TK assistant who wants to grade, and they'll do it in their sort of spare time, or in their evening or whatever. So therefore, sort of, I suppose that way you can get a few connections that way. So there is some benefits to it.
I also think that you get dropped down a lot as well. Like Simon and I, we started at the same edit house at the same time, and we were different levels. Huh?
I said I'd done a few before you.
Maybe I'm wrong, but around the same time, and there's obviously different levels of experience, and we have lots of different ways of sharing clients. Like some people don't like to share clients. Some people are more than happy to, because hopefully it goes both ways. That's kind of the unsaid rule, but kind of a reason that we started Edit Collective was kind of this idea of sharing work and clients and recommending people and putting other people forward, rather than being this kind of like, it can be quite competitive and people are pitched against each other when it comes to like big TV jobs and things that are great for your reel, and you would do anything to keep the job, or you'd rather it goes to nobody that but I don't really buy into that. I quite like the idea that you might give somebody opportunity to work with your client because you think they'll get on, and you hope that they will understand as another editor that if there's anything they can't do, they'd send it your way, as long as everyone's kind of in the same boat and interested. I think that kind of more ethical way of working with each other is actually better. It means that we can talk, we can discuss problems, we can be more nice to one another rather than it being competitive, which it can be in an edit house. So I think I would say there are other ways. It does help because there are other people to pass you down work, but it doesn't mean it's always going to happen. And I think that you can do that separately now in lots of different groups out there.
For example, like I didn't go the post house route, and I do think it's in some ways it's a lot easier because like you say, like you're like more likely to be handed down work, you're likely to meet people, but it's not impossible at all to do it the other way. Like I think I got into hands-on editing quicker maybe, but they weren't necessarily better jobs. And so I think if you do the post house route, you're probably more likely to get your hands on better work more quickly. But yeah, it's not impossible.
Perfect. Okay. So this is about getting more experience in commercials and promos. And how did you as panel makers make that transition too?
I suppose with promos, I'm going to say it's tricky now because there isn't really any budgets, and really what used to, there used to be, quite a budget for promos, and then the lower ones, you could pick up as a junior sort of assistant, and you just cut those sort of at your weekends and stuff like that in the office. And again, that's probably a bit of drop down from production companies who've got young directors coming through and they're working their way up to commercials by shooting promos. So you used to pick them up that way, but now I think it's a bit tricky because there isn't any money in promos, and you literally have to work for free on it. And I think the last two pretty much work for free on. Either the money's just gone on the equipment or there really isn't that much money.
I mean, it's crazy because even big bands, you end up being offered like 200 quid if you're lucky, for a well-known band just to cut their promo, because it's usually quite creative, it looks quite good on your reel, like they just get away with it. And so I think you get to a certain point as an editor, like I personally don't cut promos now because I don't think it's ethical to expect people to work for free. It's still the same skills, it's still the same years of work that you put in, and I don't think you'll ever really make money in promos. You have to do it because you love them and do other stuff for money. And I think really if you're going to work in TV commercials, you do need to get someone who is more advanced than you giving you the opportunity to take on a TV commercial. I think it usually means that someone has to trust you, bring you in, let you do that. Like say they're busy on another job and they say, oh, do you want to take this? And I'll oversee it just in case. Something like that kind of trust in those relationships between editors actually helps you take that next step to jobs.
Yeah.
That's another way as well, just in that, you can look around sort of directors or production companies' websites and look at the young directors, and if you like their stuff and you've got a few things on your reel, there's no harm in emailing that direction, and saying, I like your stuff. Let me know if you've got a promo that you need cutting at some point or whatever it may be, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That all that sort of publicity, or just getting out there and asking people if they've got promos is a good route, really. I think it's more enjoyable probably to cut promos than it is to probably cut like really low sort of paid jobs, because the promo will last a lot longer than the sort of the low paid job or the content. You can have it on your reel for a lot longer, because commercials or sort of content has a lifespan. It'll be for an event or something like that, and then it'll be gone. Whereas a promo, you can kind of utilize that a little bit more. That's
yeah. Okay, Sarah, do you have any tips on finding short docs gigs?
I would say, as much as I hate Facebook, there's some really good groups to join that are either editor groups or like I guess search some sort of keywords and see if you can find anything useful. There's a really good one. I think it was a girl that asked. I don't want to misgender anyone, but there's a really good group called Girls in Film, and there's a separate group called Girls in Film Exchange. And Girls in Film is like a network that tries to connect like women in film, basically, in a very inclusive way. So things like that, like, you'll get young directors like pitching, or not pitching, but asking for editors on there. Also, again, like I think what Sam was saying, like just get in touch with directors whose work you like particularly if they're sort of on your like peer level, because they'll need editors, and it's a really good way of like forming those relationships really early. So yeah, just pitch yourself, basically, cut a good reel, be friendly, be interested in their work, have a website, and choose your free work very carefully. Like Sam was saying, like pick work that is really going to stand out for you. If you're going to use free time and not be paid as much as you might deserve to be, then choose wisely, and don't end up, don't make the corporates for free. Make the nice, beautiful documentaries or the beautiful music videos for free. Choose wisely.
Well, don't work for free at all.
Oh, yeah.
Also, it's illegal to work for free, so
don't work for free.
Okay, are there any, so speaking of groups, I've put down the Rough Assembly, but are there any other long form editor groups an experienced editor can join?
I really like Avid Editors of Facebook. This is quite like a nice little community. There's lots of good like tips and stuff on there. It's Avid, not for Premiere, but it's long form.
Yeah.
And there are loads of links on the Edit Collective site. We have what do we have? We have where is it? It's On Our Radar is a kind of another place to pick up other groups and other people that are doing similar things. My kind of favorite for picking up commercial work or more kind of commercially styled content is Women in Film and Production. They have a good Facebook group, and everyone's usually really nice in there. So yeah, that's where I would pick up more commercially based work.
Okay, great. Who's your favorite editor? Sarah, go.
I don't know. I need a minute. That's a big question.
Nia. Your favorite editor, Nia?
Kat James.
Shall I do a little bit about the rate card, Nia?
Yeah, you can think about your favorite editors, and we'll close with that. So yes, Kat, if you can just say a little thing actually about all the Back2 Post rate cards, because I think they're really important. So yeah, please.
So I hope all of you guys that aren't Back2 members have enjoyed the webinar and all the other ones in the series, and please do join if you are not. And I think if you're unemployed at the moment, there's a £5 reduced rate subscription. I would highly recommend being part of the union. They've helped me countless times with lots of difficult clients, payments, people who try and just abuse you. You could go to them for any kind of help. And we have the committee for editors, long form, short form, factual, drama, and they're always working tirelessly to make everything better for everyone else. So get involved with the union if you can, and obviously join Edit Collective if you go on the Facebook page. That we're over 400 members at the moment internationally, and we have a website. We represent editors on there as well. And yeah, find your group, I think, is the, find your people when you're freelance. I think that's the biggest thing to do. That helps the most. And then rate card. Everyone should use, please everyone use the rate cards that Vector have created. There is a short form editor's rate card. There is a long form editor's rate card. How many are there, Dia? There's documentary and factual, drama, sound editors.
Yeah, there's post sound. There's actually 5 that spans the entirety of post. And I'd like to say something, because I don't think that this is often recognized, but actually Vector haven't developed it. Vector have facilitated it. There have been countless amazing editors who have just put in hours and hours and hours of work on improving the rates and the T's and C's across the industry. And Kat, you've done a huge amount of work for short form. So I do really recommend that you get that you become familiar with them, because actually when you're entering the industry, it's really professional to know how to look after yourself. It's really professional to know what the rates are. It's exceptionally professional to not undercut anyone else. And I think it's best that you understand the terms and conditions in which you are entering, because it'll only make your working life a lot better.
Yeah, I very, very much second that, Nia. Know your rights, and unfortunately you have to reiterate your rights. Don't expect people to know them. If you're a freelancer and you haven't got anybody else, you haven't got an agent, you haven't got a production company behind you or an edit house behind you, you have to really have your own back, and don't neglect that on a job. Never neglect yourself and your time. Always set your time of day that you work. Always say what you can and can't do. If you need to change the schedule, you just talk to them. And I think everything is relatively movable and flexible, as long as, if they haven't got the money, then you say, well, can you give me more time? If they have lots of money, then you just say, that's great, but I work different rates on the weekends, or I work overtime. And I don't think that should be a problem. Have confidence to speak up. And if anyone wants to ask more about how to negotiate your rates when it's you, and it's obviously difficult because you haven't got somebody in between to talk to the producer, we're doing a lot of that at the moment with Sarah Putt, who's teaching freelancers how to negotiate. Did she do her talk already, Nia?
She's actually, if you're a Vector member, you will have received an email last Friday. She's doing a networking masterclass tomorrow. So I really highly recommend that you come to that. And then she's doing the negotiations masterclass in 2 weeks' time. But there's no information about that out yet.
Yeah, twice, and it's incredible. It's the best. Anyone that's a freelancer should watch that.
Yeah. Something else that she said actually that that is good for people to know is she's got such a lovely way about her. She kind of says, it's okay to make mistakes. We all make mistakes, but it's not okay to try and hide it. It's, and because the thing is, the producer will be there as someone who is also able to help. So it's okay if you make mistakes, because we learn from them, but it's not okay to try and hide them. Simon?
I was just going to interject there and just say, yeah, I mean that's totally true. It's completely okay to make mistakes, and at the end of the day, everything is solvable. There is no problem that cannot be solved by just going back through it, or sitting down and working it out. Even if you have erased the whole drive, it can be solved. So always speak to your producer about it and just say, this has happened, wherever it may be. and then you can work out the solution.
Yeah.
There's no point in, because otherwise you'll just get to the end, or you'll get to a crunch point and it'll just blow up, basically. So everything is solvable. So just remember that, and you'll be okay.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, who are your favorite editors?
I have one now, actually. I can think of one.
Okay, go ahead, Sarah. Go ahead.
So I want to shout out an editor called Kurt Engfer, who is a doc editor. I would say, like, the film that I'm most obsessed with that he cut is Fahrenheit 9/11, which doesn't need an introduction, obviously. He was like a consulting editor on a film that I worked on a couple of years ago, and it's just an absolute fountain of wisdom. And literally anything he told me is burned in my brain. And if you want to see like a masterclass in condensing a huge amount of information into a really short amount of time, watch the intro of Fahrenheit 9/11, because it's just crazy.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay. Simon?
Okay, so I've got a couple here. I think for like commercials editing, and I've assisted quite good editors over the years. I assisted Paul Watts for 5 years, who's probably most awarded commercial editor in the UK. But I'm going to go with someone who I assisted beforehand, called Mark Langley, who is actually out in Canada at the moment. And I'm going to choose him just because I've worked with loads of editors as well, sort of assistant-wise. But it's just the sort of the approach that he has to jobs, in that basically, kind of a job is a job, whether it's little, small, or whatever. You have the same approach and the same sort of methodical, sort of, sort of detailed aspect to working on that job and honing every element out of it. And just generally versatility, sort of comedy, or whatever it may be, effects, or so that's my commercials one. And I'm going to go with just for features, I'm just going to say Lee Smith, because I've recently watched Dunkirk, and I think that is a real masterclass in how to edit, basically. The way the story goes backwards and forwards, and it takes you a while to pick up little things, but the intricate details in each scene which lead you back and forth, I think are quite amazing.
The Art of the Cut podcast, I think that's what it's called, episode with Lee is so interesting to hear how they made that film, because it's so much of it was reliant on him and his team, like figuring out if that day's cut had worked, because obviously it's a fake one shot. It's
amazing. Okay, Sarah, could you put that down for all the attendees in the chat box, that podcast? Thanks. Okay, that's it.
My favourite editor is Agathe, by the way. Agathe Barbier, shout out, number one.
Oh yeah, sorry, I've got to shout out to one person, Andre Rodriguez, who sent me the project today so I could do all this. Thank you.
Amazing. Okay, thank you so much for your time. It's been great, and I'm sure it's been absolutely incredible for people who are actually quite lucky. I think everyone is just so lucky to have time at the moment. This pandemic is awful, but everyone's got more time and access, and yeah, I think it's really great that we're kind of embracing it. So Sarah Keeling, thank you so much for your time, and Simon Hargood, and to the absolute troublemaker that is Kat Janes, who runs the Edit Collective and is also on the Beck2 committee. Please join. We need you. You need the union. We need a better industry for everyone who's working in it. And honestly, the post-production and facilities branch are one of the most kind of radical branches across any trade union, I would say, and are doing incredible work. So you're in fantastic hands. Okay, have a lovely evening. Thank you, everyone. Open those windows, get some fresh air in, and take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Any more questions that you think of afterwards, just you can email info.editcollective@gmail.com, and I could forward things on to Sarah or Simon if you have any extra technical questions or anything else you want to know.
Yeah.
So, thanks everyone.
Thanks. Bye.